So let me start by sort of summarizing the overall story we shared earlier this week. Leading into this week, we made the difficult decision to deprecate particle mesh. And this is a challenging decision for us because it's a technology that we were really excited about. We announced it in early 2018, we shipped it in late 2018. And so the product and the technology have been in the field now for about a year, a little bit longer. And through that period, we've learned a lot about how people were using particle mesh and how people were generally thinking about using mesh networking for IoT products. And before I get into that, I want to start with a little bit of why we were excited about particle mesh in the first place. When we launched this product in early 2018, it was in response to some things that we were seeing coming out of our customer base and the developer community naturally. We saw a number of customers who were starting to build their own point-to-point radios to build additional wireless sensor networks around. At that time, it was products based on the photon and based on the electron, and they were using Bluetooth or LoRa or a variety of different radios, and generally facing a technical challenge that once you enter that world of building these networks, you're now faced with dealing with these local wireless networks and sort of administering and managing those wireless networks. That's a new challenge. And we thought this is a great opportunity for Particle. This is the kind of technology problem that we'd like to take on because it's clear that there's use, there's value, there's reasons to try and connect these things, and it's hard, right? Our job is essentially to take the hardest, most difficult technical challenges associated with building an IoT product and try and eliminate that complexity and try and make it easier to build these products and to build them well and to make them work well and be secure and reliable and things of that nature. So it felt like the kind of problem that we were well suited to attack. Thread, which is a network, a sort of version of mesh networking that was developed in-house originally at Google Nest, that they have recently open sourced as OpenThread, have just recently become available and showed a lot of promise. It's there's a lot of features and characteristics of Thread that were really that we were really excited about. There's robustness and reliability. It's designed for security systems, so there's a lot of characteristics that work really well for the kinds of things that we expected customers to do with that technology. So there are a lot of reasons for us to get excited about it, and we shared that excitement with you. We made a big product launch. It was a major feature of our third generation products, the Argonne, the Boron, and of course the Xenon, which is mesh only, that we announced in early 2018 and that we delivered to customers in late 2018. Now, what's happened since is we started to see how people were using it. We started to discover challenges in our own ability to support all of the various ways that people were using mesh. And we also started to recognize some challenges that were inherent in the technology itself. And so I'll start with the first. We took on the challenge of helping our customers administer and oversee wireless mesh networks because we saw it as a challenge that we could help with. However, in practice, what we found is that it's really difficult to abstract something that complex to the point where it just works. One of the questions that's been raised in the community and the forums is, well, a lot of us are technical. Couldn't we sort of be in a position to better manage it ourselves? And that's true, and it's true that many of our customers are very technical. But it's also true that many of our customers are technical in ways that might not fit with networking, right? So we have a lot of customers who have a ton of expertise in electrical engineering and embedded systems and in web software, but networking and connectivity might not be their expertise. Our job is to try and take all of that complexity and try and hide it away so you don't have to know that much about those kinds of things. And practically what we found is that there's enough variation in the ways that people deploy these things that it's really tough to entirely abstract. That makes it hard for us to deliver a product in the way that we think is the right way to deliver a product, which is to create an experience that doesn't require that depth of technical knowledge in order to build something that works well. Second is, at the same time, we were starting to recognize the challenges that were based on just the physical radio itself, which is really coming back to 2.4 gigahertz 802.15.4 mesh networking, which I will apologize for using a bunch of numbers in a row, but essentially mesh networking running on the 2.4 gigahertz band. The reason this is important to highlight is because 2.4 gigahertz radios, which are the same band used for a lot of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth products, have limited range. That band is sort of a healthy mix of range and bandwidth. It's the reason that we use it for a bunch of different kinds of radios that we have around our house, but the range is limited. Mesh was originally designed for consumer applications where the range of a mesh network is about the size of a home, or the range of a 2.4 gigahertz network is about the size of the home. Now, I'm sure plenty of you have Wi-Fi networks with corners in your house that they can't quite get to. I know I do. And so it's not a perfect solution necessarily, but it works pretty well. What we found is that a lot of our customers were taking mesh into environments where there aren't homes, there aren't consumer environments, whether it's factories or refrigerators and sort of industrial environments. And in those environments, things are just a little bit more spread out and there's more obstacles to deal with. And so we have customers who are struggling with getting connectivity through a refrigerator wall. We have customers who are struggling because the devices they were connecting were just a little bit too far apart. And what we realized is that the limitations of that 2.4 gigahertz radio make it difficult for a lot of our customers to be successful, especially if they're not coming in as networking experts, where it's not necessarily clear what the exact range is that might be necessary to make a product work well. So that combination of the two put us in a position where we said, you know what, this is a technology that we were excited about, but when we look at what's happening in practice, when we look at the experience that our customers are having, it's not meeting our expectations. The experience using particle mesh does not meet the experience that we've come to expect of ourselves or other products. And when we think about what it would take for us to deliver on that, it's still a massive effort in front of us that would mean that we wouldn't be able to dedicate the effort to the rest of our core products that are now in wide use in products that are deployed in market, all the way from small scale prototypes to pilots to field trials to large scale deployments of many thousands and tens of thousands of devices. We really need to invest resources first in the things that customers are already widely deploying, with cellular and Wi-Fi communications. And so faced with a decision to say, do we bet the farm on this technology, which we're finding has some fundamental weaknesses, or do we take those resources and put it back into the things that we're already doing? We decided it's the best decision to do the latter. Now we recognize that comes with a cost, and that means that for folks who are using particle mesh now, we've laid out a deprecation timeline that says that we won't be able to add new devices through the after the end of 2020. Particle mesh existing networks will still work, but we will be shutting off activation of new devices. We're ending manufacturing of the Xenon, and we're doing so in a world where we intend to continue to invest in the Argonne and the Boron and the other products that are part of our third generation fleet of products. The result of this will be a reinvestment in the things that we're doing today and investment in resources in making some of the things that we're doing even better, really focusing on over-the-air software updates and diagnostics, which have become really important parts of the particle development experience and the experience deploying an IoT product with Particle. And we're also working on new versions of cellular technology that will allow us to provide global coverage on LTE and a deeper and more complete experience for some of our customers who are thinking about tracking the locations of mobile assets. And so we'll be sharing some of those product announcements a little bit later this year. We have a conference coming up in April, our annual conference Spectra. We'll be talking a little bit more about the things that we are going to continue to invest in and continue to build out. And so, of course, totally understand the challenges that we've put many of you in, and hope to rebuild and regain the trust in Particle through the work that we're doing and the rest of the platform, and the rest of the products that we've built. So, I'll pause there. I think we have some questions to start with.
Yep, absolutely. So we have, Zach and I have both been spending some time on the forums over the last, 48 hours, especially over the last 7 years, but also the last 48 hours, especially, to listen to you all, hear your concerns, try to provide answers where there's where there's uncertainty. And so we've got a short collection of questions that have been collected from the forums that we'll address here on the live stream, and then we've also got we'll also be answering new questions that are coming in during the live stream as well. So if your question isn't addressed in the first 5 or 6 questions that we answer here, I encourage you to send it in, and we've made time so that we can have those conversations and answer those questions for you. So the first question that we've got here on our list, will my existing particle mesh deployment continue to work? What will happen to it?
Yes. So we're not shutting off the APIs and the cloud service, the sort of underlying cloud services that allow particle mesh to work. We will be shutting off the creation of new networks, and so activation of new devices. So that'll happen at the end of 2020. So through 2020, there will be various points of deprecation, but essentially things will work the same. At the end of 2020, we will continue to support existing mesh networks and mesh devices, but we won't be allowing the activation of new ones.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think for those of you, many of you in the forums, mentioned that you've been following the particle journey since the Spark core, and if you are one of those folks who still has a Spark core in your drawer, you know that those devices can still connect to the particle cloud as well, and so that's really our intention here with the Xenon as well, is for those of you who have built things, activated them, we have no intention or plans of discontinuing cloud service for those devices. So sort of a secondary question about Xenons, right? So you mentioned at the end of 2020, we're not going to be allowing new mesh activations for Xenons. So what do I do with my Xenons after that point?
Yeah, so there's a few different options. And I think this is one of the benefits of open source hardware and the open source software stack that runs on top of it is that the Xenons will continue to work in different ways. So one, if you've already activated a Xenon into a mesh network, it will keep working. And so one of the ways that you can keep working with that Xenon is the same way that you have today if it's activated by that point. Second is you can use the Xenon as a sort of Bluetooth development kit. If you think about what a Xenon includes, it includes that core microcontroller that powers all of the Generation 3 products, which is a Nordic nRF52840 that includes support for Bluetooth, as well as for 802.15.4 mesh, which is what particle mesh is based on. You can continue to use it to develop Bluetooth-oriented applications. You can also reprogram it. Again, benefits of open source is, and we have customers, we have folks already doing this, you can reprogram it with Nordic's SDK, and we provided some instructions for how to do that in our blog post and on our documentation. You can also reprogram it with CircuitPython, which has been developed by Adafruit, and folks over at Adafruit would be delighted to have more people developing in the CircuitPython ecosystem, which is a great set of tools that they've built. And so those are a few different ways that you can use the Xenon going forward. There have been a couple others that have been raised as questions in the community. There are also opportunities. So, for instance, Zephyr is a sort of alternative open source operating system for these things that I believe has support for that same chip. So that's another option. And fundamentally, you can think of it as continuing to be an nRF52840 development board, which means that any other projects that provide support for the nRF52840, it can conceivably be reprogrammed to power those, so long as the folks that are providing that SDK or those software development tools provide and develop support for the Xenon, which many folks already have.
Mm-hmm. So that as a related and follow-up question then, so we talked a little bit about thread and open thread and particle mesh. So, and you talked about some of the challenges and limitations of 2.4 gigahertz networking. So a question that we get is, what other technologies would you recommend instead of particle mesh? What about BLE mesh, And what you mentioned that mesh wasn't a good fit for some of our customers. What other options might be a better fit in those circumstances where you do need long range?
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever you're building an IoT product, the way that the product gets deployed ends up determining a lot of what is the right radio and wireless technology for you to use. And so, for instance, a lot of folks who use Wi-Fi are working in an environment in the home, right, where we generally have Wi-Fi networks available to us. Our cellular connected customers are often products that are remotely deployed, or they're in environments where there might be a Wi-Fi network, but it's hard to get access to it because of IT constraints. And so there's a technology decision you have to make there that really depends on how your product gets deployed. As it relates to these kinds of point-to-point radios, there are a bunch of different options with different characteristics that will fit with different customers. So let's start with the one that will work out of the box with the Generation 3 products, which is Bluetooth Low Energy, or BLE. BLE is a great fit for customers with a relatively small number of nodes that are relatively close together. It's 2.4 gigahertz, so it has that same sort of fundamental range. The sort of range properties are not dissimilar from mesh. Bluetooth Low Energy can be set up to connect to multiple devices, although not as many as the mesh network has. And what we found is that a lot of our customers who were using mesh weren't actually building networks with that many devices. So for that set of customers, we would very much recommend Bluetooth Low Energy. Our BLE stack went into general availability sometime last year. Yeah. We're continuing to invest in it, and we'll continue to build that out and supporting some customers in making that transition as well, from particle mesh onto Bluetooth Low Energy, if that's the right fit for them. So that's one option. The second option is LoRa, or generally sub-gigahertz radios, but LoRa has definitely risen to the top in terms of the various kinds of sub-gigahertz radios that are available. And so a little bit of just quick description of 900 megahertz versus 2.4 gigahertz for those who are not wireless radio experts. So generally, lower frequency radios have a longer range. If you think about FM versus AM radio, FM radio is higher fidelity. It's the reason that it sounds better, so most of us probably listen to FM radio when listening to music. But AM transmitters, which are lower frequency, go much further. You need to have fewer of them to cover an area. And so if you're outside of a city, AM radio might be your best option. AM radio has enough fidelity for voice, so it's often used for like talk radio, but less so for music. So if you think about FM versus AM radio, the ways in which we use it, you can think of 2.4 gigahertz versus sub-gigahertz or 900 megahertz as kind of the same thing, right? Where what you get when you use a sub-gigahertz radio is longer range, and you give up bandwidth in order. That's a trade-off that you make when you're using one versus the other. If you remember, I remember having a 900 megahertz phone. That's like my, memory of what 900 megahertz was for us, which was popular back in the day before smartphones. The 900 megahertz is another open band, different frequencies in different parts of the world. And it has good properties for products that require a longer range because the radios inherently just go further. LoRa, which is short for long range, is a technology that uses some really interesting physical radio stuff, spread spectrum, cool radio stuff that is developed by Semtech that gets even further range in a way that has become very popular because it's a great radio. LoRa is a really good solution for long-range point-to-point radios. There's a bunch of developer kits and developer tools that you can get which would fit well with using a particle boron or argon as a backhaul. So for instance, Adafruit has LoRa developer kits that are in the feather wing form factor that you can plug into a feather device that would pair really well with particle devices. And we have a bunch of customers who are doing that. That is one of not an uncommon way for people to build those point-to-point networks. The third option is to continue using 802.15.4 mesh, using the tools that are provided by Nordic and the sort of underlying mesh networking stack from OpenThread, which for some customers is the right choice. It's not the majority of folks who are using particle mesh necessarily, but there are absolutely people for whom that is the right networking solution, where in order to go down that road, you'll have to have some expertise in sort of managing that wireless network. So it will require a little bit of networking knowledge, but it's absolutely still possible to pursue that path, even without particle mesh there as a tool that we're providing.
Awesome. So I guess another question that we saw asked in the forums that we addressed a little bit there, but we'll also sort of address here on the live stream. The question of okay, so we've made a decision to deprecate particle mesh networking technology to end production of the Xenon through the course of 2020. So as it relates to the other mesh products, so the Argonne and the Boron, are those also up for deprecation? Or what about some of our older products, more established products like the photon electron? Are those up for deprecation? And the question of what are the chances, or how do we know if something like this will happen again in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So the the photon electron, boron, and argon, which are sort of two primary sets of products for Gen 2 and Gen 3, are still in active development, are still are widely deployed, and are not being deprecated and will not be deprecated. One of the major distinctions between those products and the technology of particle mesh is that those products are already in. We have many customers who are already in production with products in the field sitting on top of those technologies, and so. Start by saying, first off, we can't deprecate them, right? They're way too widely used, nor would we want to, right? They're all very important core parts of our business. Part of our decision to deprecate particle mesh at this point in time is to do so at a point where there has been a lot of exploration, but there haven't been yet major commercial deployments of particle mesh, which means, although we understand, obviously, there's a lot of pain associated with ending development of something where lots of folks were in active development. It's better to do it now than a year from now after customers are in the field, right? And with products that their customers are using, which would obviously be a much more painful deprecation. So the photon electron as generation 2 products, we will continue to support, we will continue to manufacture, we're continuing development on to give customers the best experience possible of developing on the second generation products, which is absolutely a necessity for the kinds of products that people build with particle, right? These products don't go away; they last for a long time. Our customers connect things like hot tubs and air conditioners, and those products last for 10 years, right? So it's important for us to support them for the period of time that those products are in use. Now, our Generation 3 products are newer, right? And so they have additional capabilities like the Bluetooth radio and the NFC radio, as well as just generally being on newer silicon, coming from Nordic, as opposed to the Generation 2 products being coming from ST. If you are working on something right now, if you're developing a new product, I would highly encourage you to do so on Generation 3, because that's the latest and greatest. And it's the best thing to be developing on now. Going forward, we will continue to support Generation 2 so long as there is demand for us to continue to support it, which I expect will be true for quite some time.
Great. And then the last question that we pre-prepared, and then we'll move on to the questions that I see are now coming in from the live stream, which is great. Is you've addressed some of the sort of technical motivations and the sort of customer product technology fit reasons for making the decision to deprecate mesh, and then you also talked a little bit about how mesh today is at a phase where there are a limited number or no major commercial deployments. And so your question, which was digging into that a little bit and trying to understand, outside of the technology, how much of the decision to deprecate the Xenon was related to sort of business model, revenue generation kind of issues versus, or maybe beyond some of the issues that we talked about already.
Right, exactly. So let's start by just talking about Particle's business model, right? Like, how do we make money as a business? How do we grow? Because we are a profit-seeking business. We are a venture-backed business. It is our job to grow our business over time. And because of what we do, Particle's success is entirely tied to our customers' success. So Particle wins when you win. when our customers take a product that they've been prototyping and that they've been building, for 1, 2, 3, 10 prototypes, then they take it from that small scale prototype, they bring it into a field trial where they're trying it with 50 customers, 100 customers, then take it into production where they start to ship to hundreds and then thousands and then tens of thousands of customers and so on. Our success as a business is tied to your success as our customers. So what we want to see is as many customers as possible go through that journey of saying, I went from that prototype, which worked, all the way through to a product that's in market where I'm solving a real problem for my customers, where I'm using connectivity to connect machines or devices or vehicles in a way that does something important, right? That solves a problem for someone. If our customers do that, then we win. When we look at the Xenon, we had not yet started to monetize it, or really the sort of particle mesh. We had plans to, of course, but the decision to not pursue particle mesh further really comes from a place of saying we don't feel like this is a technology because of a little bit of us and a little bit of the technology itself that we think we can really support customers in being successful on. And if we don't think customers are going to be successful in using particle mesh, then it's true that the business will not be there. And it sort of doesn't matter how we charge for it or what our pricing model is, because at the end of the day, we charge our customers based on the success that they have deploying a product with Particle. And so, yes, there are absolutely business reasons, right? It's a business decision not to pursue this, but it comes from a recognition that we don't feel like our customers will be successful, generally speaking, going down this path, and we'd rather create paths where we do see customers being extremely successful in deploying cellular connected devices and deploying Wi-Fi connected devices on the platform.
So maybe it's even fair to say that as far as commercial opportunities, large amount of opportunity, but so not decision not driven by not seeing applications or not seeing opportunities for mesh, but rather looking at the needs of those opportunities and looking at the effort and the complexity that needed to be managed in order to make those opportunities successful, and saying, well, the opportunities are there, but the path is a challenging one.
Right. There are too many cases where I think folks, we saw customers who were really excited about particle mesh and started to use it, and just saying, like, it just doesn't have the range, right? It just isn't like it. We're excited about the idea of it, but practically speaking, the ways in which we're deploying this product isn't just by working. And there's when it comes down to the physical layer and the distance the radio can go, there's not much we can do. There's a point at which it's just not the right technology for what you're trying to do, even though the vision of what it's intended to do might fit well with the use case that you're trying to develop.
So with that, we've sort of finished our questions that we collected over the last couple of days from the forums, and so now we're going to read off some of the live questions coming in from the stream. So a few questions about hardware, additional questions about some of the technologies that we've just talked about. First question, is LoRa or a long-range radio stack under consideration for Particle's future?
That's a great question. So I'll start with our product roadmap for 2020, which we'll be sharing more details of at Spectra in April. And so shout out to Spectra if you're interested. Come hang out with us in Chicago, where we'll be talking about the Sub 5. Our product roadmap is for the year is really focused on taking the things that we're doing already and doing them better. And so in that sense, we don't have short-term plans. We don't have near-term plans to develop a product for LoRa. That said, I think that we have plenty of customers who are already using LoRa with Particle by using third-party chips that are connected to really all of our products, but primarily the one in Argonne, because LoRa is relatively new, and of course then it makes sense that it would be used with our newer products. We see that happening already. We'd love to continue to support that through use of those third-party accessories that you can already buy, whether it's the chips that are coming directly from Semtech or some of the other companies that they have licensed that technology to, or development boards coming from folks like Adafruit. who have created feather wings to support these LoRa nodes. So that's already possible today with Particle, and absolutely something that we would love to continue to support. As far as actually adopting it as a first-class citizen of Particle, the way that we have with Wi-Fi, the way that we have with cellular, the way that we have with Bluetooth, we don't have any current plans for doing so. But that doesn't mean that it wouldn't, further out in the future, wouldn't be up for consideration.
Yeah, similarly, I think, a lot of the reasons that we originally identified an opportunity with mesh is this idea that, there are use cases within IoT that extend beyond an individual device on its own being connected to the internet, right? And I think we recognize the opportunity of having devices that have the ability to communicate with each other locally. Again, that's a large part of the reason why we saw opportunity here with mesh, and LoRa is another one of those technologies that has become so popular because there's lots of utility for it. So just to echo, I don't think that trend will stop. I think it will only grow. I think the number of uses for and probably types and varieties of local communication will continue to grow. And as a company that's looking to enable the next wave, the next generation of IoT practitioners, I think it's something that we don't have short-term plans for. We'll keep our eyes on. Okay. Another question related to, again, sort of Bluetooth local communications world, and this one I think is a short answer. What are the plans for future BLE and NFC feature development?
So right now, and Will, you might
Sure.
have something to add here. Our sort of short-term and immediate focus on Bluetooth is just continuing to expand the sort of examples that we provide of how to use the existing Particle stuff effectively, and so just sort of make it easier to use and easier to work with. And we expect that as some of you transition from Particle Mesh onto Bluetooth Low Energy, we'll be doing that with you. We already have some of those conversations that are live now.
And so again, just to clarify and just to reiterate, both Bluetooth and NFC are fully, generally available, fully supported features of our Generation 3 hardware, so the Argonne and the Boron. And so we absolutely intend to continue to support and develop those stacks. They're not going anywhere, and again, we see growing usage of Bluetooth, both for device-to-device communications as well as device-to-phone communications. So we'll continue investing in those stacks, and especially as usage of those tools continues to grow, and we find new ways to create value for customers using those technologies. So I think if you are a user of Bluetooth, if you are a user of our NFC features of our Gen 3 hardware, and there are things that you'd like to be able to do with those products that you can't do today, our roadmap is open and receptive to those opportunities to continue to make things easier for you as you're building out your product or your product. Okay, let's see here. So a few more hardware questions relating to form factor. So maybe we'll start with this first one. Are there any current plans on the roadmap for an Ethernet product?
So we don't have plans for developing a new Ethernet product. We are continuing to support the Ethernet feather wing, which has become a popular way to add a Ethernet connection to products that would also connect through either a cellular or Wi-Fi connection using an Argonne or Boron, depending on which one is the right fit for what you're using, and we continue to support that and support Ethernet connected devices.
Mm-hmm. And then we have a couple more questions here. Are you considering encapsulated form factor with the Gen 3 line? Yeah, maybe I can take that one. So the short answer is yes. When we introduced our second generation of hardware, we introduced really our first robust, resilient, industrialized form factor for production, which is our encapsulated form factor in the form of the E-Series. So that's an important form factor for customers who are building, as Zach alluded to, products that need to exist in the world for a very long period of time, perhaps in adverse environmental conditions. Soldering a board down to another board is just about the best way to make sure that it doesn't come disconnected. So I think as we've seen customers that have deployed successfully with our encapsulated boards with Gen 2 and are looking to migrate to Gen 3 to take advantage of some of the features like Bluetooth, for example, and want to stay current with the product line, we originally announced their generation, we announced a new form factor, the M.2 form factor, which is a sort of removable cartridge-based PCIe successor that makes sort of interchangeability possible, field upgradability, and repairs. But also, again, we have these customers that are moving from our generation 2 to our generation 3. And so for those customers and for new customers for whom the castellated form factor is a better fit, we're committed to providing a path forward. And so there are castellated, Gen 3 castellated boards that are in our future-looking roadmap. Again, Spectra, not to make another plug, but is a great place where we'll be sharing a lot more detail about our hardware roadmap, reviewing form factors, and talking about some of the other exciting things that we have coming up in the world of hardware. Great. Okay, let's see here. A question that now flipping from hardware a little bit to cellular and cellular connectivity technologies, 3G, LTE, which you alluded to previously as well. So with the sunset of 3G networks, what's the plan with the Electron form factor?
Good question. So we're continuing to, we've been developing LTE-based products under the Electron form factor based on demand. You can, we do now have an Electron LTE product that you can buy because we recognize that there are some folks who are still working with the Electron E-Series form factor. This is part of the reason for investing in investing in castellated SOMs and to plug-and-play SOMs in parallel is because A, there's different reasons for using one versus the other, and also we have customers who are using the form factor but are looking for new radio. So we are investing in that for LTE, and that currently exists. And we'll be talking more about our plans for future LTE products and expanding to global coverage on with LTE. We'll be talking about at Spectrum.
Yeah, and actually, I think that's we talked a little bit earlier about deprecation plans and okay, what's going to happen to, is anything going to happen to the photon electron? Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth pointing out here that especially if you are an electron user, 2G or 3G electron user, you backed our campaign back when those were the technologies du jour. In around the world, there are 2G and 3G technology sunsets that are happening, primarily driven by carriers who are trying to repurpose bandwidth from these older technologies for newer ones. And so, depending on where you live, these kinds of network sunset dates are being driven across different schedules, have different timelines, even for different carriers within the same country. There's sort of a wealth of information and complexity that comes along with that discussion, so I won't dive into it. But I will say it is probably, it's more likely and more possible actually that if you're here in the U.S., that a technology like 2G or 3G will be sunset by the carriers far before anything happens to the Electron form factor. So definitely do keep your eye on it. And again, we've got resources and information on our website. We'll be talking more about our general portfolio transition to LTE at Spectra and throughout the rest of the year here in 2020.
I'll very much point out that the right cellular technology decision for any customer depends entirely on what country you live in and what country you're deploying in, because the whole world is transitioning, of course, to LTE and at some point into 5G, but doing so at very different paces. And the U.S. in particular has been always sort of a faster mover on new cellular technologies, and is the first country to be setting short timelines for deprecation of 2G and 3G. There's a lot of other countries in the world that have no short-term intent of deprecating 2G and 3G and are continuing to support those, in particular for IoT or M2M products, as they've been called more traditionally. And so, if you're looking to figure out what is the best radio for you in your country, we have some documentation on our website. It's something we've written some content on, and if you're looking to figure out what's best for you, you can contact our sales team as well, or ask us questions in the forums, depending on whether you're working on prototypes or whether you're looking to build a product at scale.
Yeah, and so we just had a question come in that we'll speak to now, just because it's related to the conversation we've been having. So, talking, we opened up a little bit and talked a little bit about cellular technologies. And so we have someone who's asking if there's likely to be future support for NVIOT as well. You know, I think oftentimes when you're looking at technologies like LoRa and LTE, M1 and NVIOT, they're oftentimes positioned at these long-range, low-power kind of applications. CAP M1 is in our portfolio now, so any future plans for NVIOT?
Yeah, it's a great question. So generally, if you think about what we're, the way that we look at these technologies is we want to be able to support for our customers new technologies that solve real problems for them that we believe are viable for use today. Because it's important that we expect our customers to do everything from building a quick prototype to deploying a product at scale. And if you're intending to go through that journey quickly, which of course is what we're trying to help you with, to go from that prototype to a large scale deployment in the shortest period of time possible, the technology has to work for you, not at some point in the future, but today. When we look at the somewhat fragmented future of LTE for cellular technologies, we are very excited about narrowband NB-IoT or NB1, depending on your favorite flavor of how you
NB2's coming out.
Oh, cool. NB2. Depending on how you like which way you describe it, we're excited about the fundamental technology. Although what we've seen so far is those rollouts have been slow, in part because it requires actually deploying new radios, and also and that there is large variation in how different carriers around the world are pursuing those narrowband deployments, which means that creating something that works around the world in different countries and works the same as of this moment today, we're just not there yet. That will change. And so is narrowband in our future? Yes. Is it in our short-term future? Are we working on it right now? No. Because we don't believe it's at a point yet where we could stand behind it and say, we feel comfortable saying to you, our customers, yes, you can deploy a product on narrowband today. I really look forward to the day where that changes, and it's something that we pay a lot of close attention to, figuring out when that moment is likely to happen. Given that's the case, the available technologies that are best suited for IoT products are LTE Cat M1 or LTE M, again, depending on your vocabulary of choice, and LTE Cat 1. Currently, Particle supports Cat M1 in the US and North America. We intend to expand the countries that we support that as other countries bring their M1 networks live, which is happening at various speeds in different parts of the world. So again, the answer kind of depends on where you are. We're also working on Cat 1 solutions that will be available for global deployment. And Cat 1 works today around the world. So some of the things that we're working on coming around the corner. Narrowband is in our future. Estimated dates still TBD.
Yeah. Great. So flipping back to Xenon, to particle mesh for a second here. We have a statement and a question. I enjoyed mesh functions like publish and subscribe as it made it simple to do cool stuff. I understand there are other particle functions. Is there a way to accomplish this on a local network?
Yeah. So if you think about the way that you interact with particle devices, we have these what we call our primitives. The primary ways that you can interact with the device are that you can publish, you can subscribe, you can call a function, and you can retrieve a variable. Those allow for bidirectional communications in the ways that sort of are designed to tie web applications to physical devices in a way that's sort of natural and makes sense for the way that these products get built. We mirrored some of that structure in the way that particle mesh works. So mesh.publish, mesh.subscribe are sort of variations of those primitives that are designed for broadcasting messages on a local network. If you were to build a Bluetooth-based product or a LoRa-based product of sort of point-to-point radios using a Boron or an Argonne as the backhaul, as the connection back to the cloud, you would be able to program the device to do publish, subscribe, function calls, and variable calls that could then broadcast messages into the Bluetooth network network. The way that you do that would likely, or our network, the way that you do that would likely depend a little bit on how you set up that network. And so it's not something that we intend to abstract in that same way, which is really what we were doing with particle mesh, where we say just use the particle functions. It will require a little bit more coding, but it's absolutely something that we can create examples for and documentation for how best to use particle with Bluetooth to like call a function on the particle device that then broadcasts a message into the Bluetooth network, which is likely the kind of thing that we would expect somebody to want to do when using Bluetooth for local connections connected back to the cloud for particle.
Yeah. Okay, let's see here. Here's one. Will the Xenon be released into the public domain?
The Xenon is already open source. So yes, I guess. The Xenon is open source hardware. You can find the design files on our GitHub. GitHub.com/particle-IoT is where you will generally find our open source, both software and hardware. You will be able to find the Xenon design files if you're interested in manufacturing your own Xenons. You are absolutely in a position to do so. Or if you're interested in taking that design and modifying it and building something else off of it, that's what's great about open source hardware.
And I want to mention as well, because we didn't directly address it at the top, but we are going to be releasing a version of our device OS, the sort of before deprecation of the mesh functionality. The final release of device OS is still in our future. It will be the device OS 1.6 line as well. And so just like our hardware is open source already today, our device OS firmware is as well, and especially with mesh networking. Obviously, we rely on the networking stacks of some of our partners and vendors in order to provide functionality. So for cellular, that's U-Blocks as an example. And one of the great things about the mesh connectivity stack is that it is open all the way down, including the implementation of OpenThread, which we use as a part of our products. And so not only on the hardware side, but on the firmware side as well. Again, we'll be releasing that version in the future while we're doing some additional improvements and cleanup in advance of that final release. And so I encourage you to take a look at that as well. And if you do want to continue using parts of the particle firmware stack, those are also available and can be tweaked, edited, modified, changed to your content.
Actually, one other thing to point out, which is if one of the things that you do want to do is continue to have a way to develop products with the NRF52840, have a sort of NRF52840 developer kit beyond the end of manufacturing of the Xenon. We are not the only people who make a Feather form factor NRF52840 developer kit. So Adafruit in particular is a great place to go. They have their own products that suit the same need and can be used to develop NRF52840 solutions. And I believe there are other alternatives available on the market as well.
Okay. And then another question here on the hardware, back in the world of hardware. We have a couple questions about the Argonne. And essentially, we talked a little bit before about a couple of our mass production form factors, M.2 and the encapsulated form factor for for Wi-Fi. So questions about looking at the Argonne and Wi-Fi opportunities at scale. Will there be additional hardware in that M.2 or encapsulated form factor?
You want to talk about the hardware sort of roadmap there?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is something that we're going to be sharing a little bit more detail on at our annual conference in Spectra. But absolutely, we have customers who have started building and scaling with Gen 3 products, including the Argonne, who have different needs. And I think when we look at our different form factors, they're really there to serve different customers who are deploying for different purposes. And so, although we haven't yet released a M.2 version of our Argonne form factor, in general, as it relates to our product roadmap, we're very customer driven, and we're there to support and to help our customers. And so, what I would say is we're constantly, building and evaluating the demand for those kinds of products at scale versus the Argonne itself, who some customers are building with as well. And so, if you are a as we come back and continue to refine our roadmap and finalize our plans for 2020, but also beyond, if you're a customer who has a use or a need and is interested in scaling with either with an M.2 version of the Argonne, please let us know, have that conversation so we can bring you into the fold a little bit and give you some details and background about our plans there. Great. Let's see, I'm checking here for questions. I think we may be just about out of the ones that were listed here. Okay, oh, yep, here's one more. With the deprecation of mesh, are there other features or enablement you're planning with NRF 52840, such as long-range capabilities? So
the NRF 52840 has certain radios that it supports, right? So it has Bluetooth, it has NFC, and it has 802.154 mesh networking. Bluetooth has also the particular version of Bluetooth that it supports is Bluetooth 5, which has longer range capabilities than previous Bluetooth versions, and so those capabilities are baked into what exists today. So in terms of range, I will say at sort of the high level answer of like Bluetooth range and mesh range are comparable in the sense that it's all 2.4 gigahertz based, but there may absolutely be environments where you may find that by using Bluetooth, because of some of those characteristics, that you can get a longer range out of it. And so it's worth exploring if you're looking for that sort of maybe marginally longer range. As far as significantly longer range, that's where it really requires a different radio. The NRF 52840 does not have a sub-gigahertz radio on it, and so it's limited to what can be done at 2.4 gigahertz. And so that requires an additional secondary radio, of which there are many out on the market, where the Semtech LoRa radios have become recently, especially probably the most common. Also worth looking at if you're looking for sort of sub-gigahertz radios. Texas Instruments has the 1300 series, I believe. CC1300. The CC1300 series is also sub-gigahertz range, sub-gigahertz products, not LoRa, but anything sub-gigahertz ends up with pretty long range. I believe ST was also working on some LoRa-based products that I haven't seen the latest of whether those products have been released to market. But there are a bunch of different semiconductor companies that have sort of sub-gigahertz and LoRa radios that you might want to consider. And so there's a bunch of options there.
Yeah. All right, let's see, we were about, looks like that was the last question that we're seeing through here, and we're just about out of time.
Yeah.
So before we sign off, Zach, any final thoughts to share with folks before we close out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first I want to say thank you for all the folks who have sort of shared your questions and participated in the conversation over the last few days. I recognize this is a difficult, sort of difficult piece of news to share. And so thanks for the questions and sort of figuring out with us what's the best path forward for you. We're excited to support folks who have really invested in this ecosystem. We're excited to support and figure out how can we give you a happy path forward. At the end of the day, I think our what matters here is that we give you the best way to go from where you are today to where you won't go. And my hope is that for many of you, that path continues with Particle, where you can use the Boron and Argonne, our second generation products, using Bluetooth, using third-party LoRa radios. We can hopefully give you a path forward. And if there are cases where that's not the right fit, supporting transition using CircuitPython or OpenThread SDKs or other things. We want to make sure to give people the best path forward that we can. We've provided coupon codes for folks who have bought Xenons that you should have received in your email. If you haven't, take a look. Also, if you bought your Xenon through a distributor, you can contact us to get a code. So reach out to us. Instructions for doing so are in the blog post. Thanks for everyone for your time, for joining us today, and feel free to continue asking questions. in the forums, shoot us an email via our support channels. We're here to answer whatever questions might come up. And thanks everyone for joining.